Hey guys, welcome to my first episode of a Rimworld Beginner's Guide. In this particular episode, I will be just going over how you set up your first playthrough. I'm not going to go over any of the in-game mechanics or HUD or anything like that. This is just how you set up your first game. So if you know how to set up your first game, you know how to build the world and choose colonists and all of that, please skip ahead. But if you have never played Rimworld before, or you've played it but you never really understood how you were setting stuff up at the beginning because the tutorial doesn't go too much into that, then this is the starting guide for you and how to get started. Just an FYI, I'm starting this on base game, no ideology, no royalty expansions, no mods installed. This is just vanilla of the vanilla. Even though I got a different picture here than I think the vanilla picture is, it's because I have the expansions. They're not just currently not activated. Let's get started. Main menu, select new colony. That's the first step. There you go. First step done. The next step is to choose the scenario. If you are playing this for the first time or playing this like one of your first few and you're just wanting to get a better understanding of all of these, choose Crash Landed. It's, again, vanilla of vanilla. It's the main way of how the game was supposed to be played. It's 3 people. You choose them from 8, unless you use randomizing, which we'll get there in a second. And you start with a bunch of stuff, which can be very useful. It's not a too ridiculously difficult start. It's not a ridiculously easy start. Your research is kind of middle of the tree, so you have some stuff researched, but not like everything, so there's still a lot to learn and a lot to like unlock and do. Lost Tribe, to give you just a brief overview of these others. Lost Tribe, you start with 5 people out of 8. You get to choose them out of 8. You start with less research, so you have a lack of technology, which makes it kind of difficult, but then you have 5 people, which usually means you can dedicate someone more to researching, so you unlock it. There are some other caveats to tribal, but we won't go into that because we're going to start with Crash Landed on this particular setup. The Rich Explorer, you start with 1 person, which can be difficult in its own right because you've only got 1 person. If they die, you're screwed, and you kind of have to micromanage like everything. You start with a lot more value, so you start with a lot more silver, some gold, and you start with more research, so you start with gun turrets, which can be kind of helpful for defending you right away. And then the hardest of the hard of these 4 modes, Naked Brutality. You start with nothing, not even clothes on your back, you're naked, and the elements will kill you quickly, starvation will kill you quickly. Like, it's difficult. Even on peaceful mode, you can lose Naked Brutality. The other ones, I'd be surprised if you lost them on peaceful mode, unless you really had no idea what you were doing. But Naked Brutality, you can lose that on peaceful mode. If you're starting out, start out Crash Landed. Once you understand the mechanics of the game and you play it a little bit, I'd say play at least to somewhat of the late game. Then you can come back and start thinking about these other scenarios. You can also, so you can scenario edit, so if you want to adjust something, you can. There's also a bunch of mods where you can download other scenarios that people have built with other mods in mind or other scenarios in mind. Stick with Crash Landed to start with though. Next, you have your AI Storyteller, which is the thing that makes Rimworld like super unique, which is how the game interacts with you and how you're playing through it. And basically, it's an AI that kind of knows roughly how powerful you are, and so they try and throw stuff at you to put you off, and depending on the difficulty, depends on how horrible they are to you. There are 3 main ones. You can also, again, download others through mods, but there are 3 main ones. There's Cassandra, there's Phoebe, and there's Randy. Cassandra Classic, pretty linear. As you get better, she throws harder things at you. They're pretty evenly spread out, like how often she sends them. She's the baseline of what to start out with. If you're starting Rimworld out for the first time, I'd suggest choosing Cassandra. Phoebe's, she says chillax. She's not really chillax. She just has a long gap, so things can get kind of boring between what she throws at you. But when she throws something at you, especially towards the mid and late game, it's a lot. She throws a lot at you. I don't really like playing Phoebe because she's kind of boring in a sense that you could have like weeks and weeks and weeks of like nothing happening. But then when she does throw something at you, it kind of just maybe destroys your entire playthrough, and yeah, to me that's not so fun. Randy Random is my favorite to play as. He just throws random stuff at you at random times. He can be like super nice to you and be throwing like drops and like traders coming in and just silver meteorites, and just everything goes really well. Or he can be a real pain in the butt and he could just throw raids and toxic rain and like just awful things at you. Anyway, different difficulties. Peaceful, basically they don't do anything. Yeah, it's just you like to build and you want to set up your colony. Nothing wrong with playing that. If you want to do a peaceful and chill build, I've done them before in the past. Yeah, they're fine. It's just if you don't fancy a challenge, that's absolutely fine. That's however you want to play the game. Community builder, super easy mode basically. It says if you're a new player. I'd say if you're kind of new to strategy games. Oh, it does say players who are new to this kind of game and you just want to build up a really good colony and you just want to relax. Adventure story is how I recommend people to come in. It says experienced strategy gamers. I'd say it's more like as long as you've played some level of strategy game. You don't even have to be super experienced, just how you understand how they kind of work. You'll be fine, especially if you're a gamer in other senses, you'll be fine. That's the one I recommend. Strive to Survive is kind of like, it says experienced players, but it's kind of like the baseline. Everything's set to like 100%, and I'll show you how I know that, because if you come down to custom, you can kind of see how things are set up by setting the playstyle. If I set it to peaceful, you can see colonist moods are constantly boosted. Everything's really low chance of happening. There is basically no threat scale. If you go to adventure, this is the one I'd recommend you start with. You get a little boost to colonist moods all the time. The threat scale is set to 60. Some of the bad things are set slightly lower. And then if you go to Strive to Survive, this is where everything's kind of set to 100%. It's kind of standard. I would say your best bet, start adventure story mode and reload anytime. It does mean that you can do save scumming, where basically if you lose, you can reload. Feel free to do that. Some people are like super against it. I'm like, it's for fun, right? You're not doing this because you're in some sort of competition. You're doing it because you want to have fun. So if you like lose your colony, you spent 20 hours building, hell yeah, you're going to reload and see if you can survive that situation in a different way. But just be aware that sometimes the storyteller is just against you, so I don't know how many times you reload, you may just fail. It does happen. And commitment mode just means that you have to save and exit every time you want to save, and so you can't really just like save every so often. Also, I don't think any auto save is on when you do commitment mode. So if you have like a bug occur, especially if you're playing with mods, it can cause problems. So I go reload anytime, and then it's up to you how you want to outline how you're going to play by it. Also, just FYI, you can change any of these settings midway through the game. So if you want to make it harder or easier for yourself partway through, you can go ahead and do that in these settings. So I will show you how to do that as soon as we get into the game. That'll be the last thing I show you in this tutorial. Anyway, on to the next section, which is how to create your world. This seed at the top can be any random selection of letters and numbers. I tend to just randomize seed. There is a whole Reddit dedicated to really great worlds or really crazy worlds. Definitely go and check that out. I'll chuck a link in the description below. There's also this global coverage situation. 100%, you're going to get this error, like this message come up here saying it's going to take a long time to load. Starting out, 30% is more than enough. I tend to go for 50% because I like to sometimes explore the planet a little bit. And then these kind of next sections are pretty self-explanatory. Overall rainfall, it will affect the biome. So if you have it really high, you'll have more like wet biomes. Temperature, again, super high, you'll get like desert, more deserts, and super low, you'll get more like sheet ice. I'd say if your first playthroughs, normal. Population, again, same. It's just the number of these different like other colonies that exist. I'd leave everything as kind of standard on your first playthrough. You can experiment with these later. These are quite extreme in how much they affect things, so just be aware, like if you go super low, it will be super low rainfall. You'll have a lot of desert. But yeah, go ahead and generate. Give it a second to load. So here we go, here's our world. You can see that only 30% of the world is actually land, basically. Choosing where you want to set up your colony depends on the sort of challenges you want to have from your biome. The kind of basic one is temperate forest. This is the one I recommend everyone starts with. You then will have everything from sea ice, which is super difficult. There's nothing there, it's super cold. You can't grow anything. Ice sheet, which is slightly easier. It's very cold. There's some stuff there, but not a lot. Like, I don't think there's many, if any, animals. And then you have tundra, which is sort of slightly less colder. You get slightly more stuff, slightly more animals. There is a chance to grow stuff here. Boreal forest, next step up. Temperate forest is where I recommend you start. It's this kind of middle ground, and then you can start going like warmer. So you have arid shrubland, which is slightly warmer, slightly more sand and slightly less growing space. Then you have desert, lots of sand, difficult stony soil, so you can't grow so much. Like naturally, you have to do hydroponic soil. And then there's also tropical rainforest, which is kind of like wet and higher disease rates. You can kind of see here it says average disease frequency. It's the worse the diseases. I believe there's also like tropical swamp. Yeah, a temperate swamp, sorry. I think there might be tropical swamp as well. But yeah, not every map will have every type of biome. This might be it here. Tropical swamp, right, there you go. So I'd say start with temperate forest. I would choose, so the next sort of option to kind of think about is how hilly or mountainous you want it to be. I would choose large hills or small hills or mountainous. Mountainous has some caveats with like insect infestations, because the more overhead mountain that you kind of have to mine into to kind of create space, the more chance you get an insect infestation. And also with caves, you're much more likely to get insects just naturally occurring. So if you go for like a large hill, you'll be less likely to have that sort of thing happening. So yeah, I'd say large hills or whatever you feel like, because even flat is very playable. You'll just have slightly less to mine and you'll probably want to trade a little earlier. But yeah, I'm going to go with large hills for this demonstration, and you'll see that there's also stone type. Now some people are like kind of obsessed with stone type, and to be honest, so I am somewhat. Marble is super pretty, granite is super hard. That's kind of all you need to know. There's more to go into with that, but it's so like minutiae, like min-maxing, that you really don't need to worry in your first couple of playthroughs. You can also see some other information, like it gets between 1 and 28 throughout the year depending on the season. 14.4 is the kind of standard season. Growing period is from April, May to September. The rainfall tells you roughly what it is. There is forageable berries, and animals can graze at the time that you're entering. And FYI, there is a select random site, which I sometimes like to just come in and select random places, select random colonists, and see if I can survive. It's a pretty fun way to do stuff. We're just going to go on to the next section, which is setting up the colonists. So if you have any questions about picking a particular space, chuck it in the comments below and I'll answer it as best I can. It's kind of like a mixture of personal preference, how you want to challenge yourself. Your first go through, do temperate forest, large hills. You can't really go too wrong with that. Okay, so selecting a colonist can be one of the most time-consuming things. You've got 3 out of 8 to choose from, and picking the right 3 can kind of take time, and also randomizing. You can kind of randomize to... You can keep randomizing until you see the perfect one, right? The main sort of areas to focus is your team skills, to make sure you have a balanced set of skills. So at the moment you can see I haven't got very many passions, and I'll go into what they are in a second, these flames, and I haven't got massive numbers in there. So it's not the best, but it's also not the worst setup. The next sort of important areas to look at is your age. You don't want someone too old because they'll end up with health issues. It's not the end of the world if they are old, especially in the early game, but something to bear in mind. If they're incapable of anything, I have definitely gone into games where I've had people incapable of stuff I didn't pay attention to and then gone, oh shit, how am I going to survive this playthrough? Kind of want to keep an eye on your incapable. Your traits, these are kind of like the most important, second to maybe the passions, because they really dictate like how they're going to have a mental break, or how often they're going to have mental breaks, and how they're going to behave and stuff. So good to keep an eye on it. You'll learn them after time. So undergrounder is, they like to stay underground. Very neurotic means that they work faster, but they're much more likely to have a breakdown at a much higher, like a 14% higher mood that they're at. They'll be much likely to have a breakdown. And they're also greedy, so they want an impressive bedroom. And until they get an impressive bedroom, they'll have a negative mood buff. So that mixture of the very neurotic and greedy could lead to someone having tantrums quite a lot. It's not the worst set. There are definitely worse. And you'll get used to the traits you don't mind playing with that are bad, the traits that you love to play with. Like, I really like Quick Sleeper and Jogger. I think most people like Quick Sleeper and Jogger. Quick Sleeper just means they sleep much faster, so they're much more active for more of the day. And Jogger just means they move faster, so they can move out of the way of danger quicker. The other area to definitely keep an eye on is health, if they have any massive health conditions. So this person has a Go Juice Addict. This is someone I would 100% not use. I would be like, nope, definitely not using that person. You get like asthma. This person had like an aching and itching scar, so they'll be upset quite a lot. They're also a pyromaniac, which is my least favorite trait. So, and they're incapable of a lot of stuff. So I'd be like, even though they're really intelligent, I'd be like, nope on them. And then next is your skills. This is kind of like, it's not the be all or end all. You don't have to start the game with people that are like maxed and stuff or really good at stuff. It's good to have a good mixture of passions and burning passions, and a good mixture of skills. Now, I'd say the current setup, other than intellect being pretty terrible, this current setup isn't the worst. Intellect is kind of important because you want to research stuff, but we can do that without skill. It'll just take a lot longer. This person, for example, has a passion in shooting. Passions just mean they learn it at a better speed. So a passion in it means they have 100%, and then a burning passion has 150% learn speed, so they learn it 1.5 times faster. Standard no passion, they learn at 0.3%, so 0.35 times, so 35%. So they won't learn it very quickly. It's very useful to have passions. You'll be better off choosing someone with a low skill with a burning passion than you would be picking someone with no passion but much higher, because the burning passion person will learn way quicker, and there is you will slowly lose learning and stuff. So there'll be like a minimum that your colonists will go to. Once they learn a little bit, it will slowly go down, and so like having a burning passion just means you can kind of outdo that much quicker. So yeah, this is not a bad setup. They've got animals, they've got a bit of social, which can be useful for trading and recruiting. They've got a bit of mining, and they've got shooting, and shooting is arguably the better, definitely the better skill in the early game, even in the late game. Like some people will say melee can be OP, and it can be in the right situations. Just shooting is just baseline good. This person is violent, incapable of violence, and incapable of intellectual. They have a leg scar, which can cause problems. It's itchy, so there'll be a little bit of pain, so they might be a bit unhappy some of the time. They're a body purist, so they don't want you to replace their right leg with peg leg. Industrious and abrasive. Again, kind of not the worst selection of traits. They're brilliant at plants, pretty good at cooking, and brilliant at mining. I'd say this person's worth keeping. They're also pretty good at medical. Medical is very important in the early game. Shooting's pretty important in the early game. Having someone who can at least cook a little bit is good because you'll get less food poisoning. And then plants is also pretty handy. So down here, these 8 skills are probably the most useful, and you kind of want the best spread that you can. And then this last guy that we have, he's brilliant at construction, and construction isn't the most important, but I love to have a good constructor because you can get some good quality items early game because of it, like good quality beds and things, and it can just help. It's not the most important thing to have. He has some interesting traits. He's not capable of intellectual or artistic, so we have one person who has 0 intellectual who is actually capable of it. But you can recruit people pretty quickly if you know what you're doing, and be able to combat the fact that we haven't got very good intellectual. So I would be happy with the setup. I would probably still check the remaining people. Like this person's not bad. They've got a burning passion in construction and animals and plants, a passion. Still no intellectual, so it wouldn't really help me change how this is, and melee isn't the most important thing in my mind. Shooting is more important. These kind of 6, it would be nice to have a bit more balance. Mathematician, really good intellectual, but they're addicted to a bunch of stuff, and they have a stab. Addictions are really a pain in the butt to get over, especially as in the early game you won't have access to these drugs easily, so you can't just like feed their addiction. This guy has a bit of intellectual. He's incapable of quite a few bits. He's good at melee. He would be the worst person to have instead of maybe the builder, because he's still got a passion in building, but I actually kind of like how we got this set up. And then if you don't like any of your 8, feel free to just randomize. Go ahead and randomize, but just on your first playthroughs, don't get too head up on having like the perfect min-max selection of colonists. It's better to go in with a slight disparity so you can learn what you can live without with. Like, I don't care about living without melee, but I know that there are players that would be adamant that you would want a melee person, because it is kind of nice to have, and there are reasons that it's good to have it. But I just don't care enough about those reasons, and it is kind of like a personal preference thing. So just bear in mind that you don't want to spend too long on this screen in your early playthroughs. Anyway, this is, you want to see down here a kind of good spread of passions, burning passions, and a good spread of numbers. And I'd say this is a good starting point, but like, if you had 5s and passions and everything, that'd be good. And no burning passions isn't the end of the world. Nice average across the board. Start. And don't go for pyromaniacs. Just don't. They're the worst. So I'm just going to go in and show you very quickly to start screen, and then if you want to know about choosing a good base location and feeding your colony and all of that, look at the other videos. There'll be at the end screen on this video what I suggest you watch next if you're just going through these guys one by one. And yes, so here we go. You've landed, you've got your colonists up. And just to show you, if you go to the options, you can go to your storyteller settings and you can change the difficulty however and how often you would like. But anyway, I hope you found this tutorial somewhat useful or interesting in setting up your first ever playthrough in Rimworld. Please drop it a like if you did, and please check out the other guides. And if you have a particular area that you'd like me to do a guide on, chuck it in the comments below. I'll do my best to create that video as soon as possible. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Have a good one, and I love this game, so I'm super glad that you're playing it. You're going to love it also.